Visiting Warwick Castle as a wheelchair user. Why did it fall short of expectations? I visited Warwick Castle in August 2024 during the summer holidays. On paper, it looked like they have lots of accessible features that meant I was going to have a really great day out. However, whilst they have invested a lot in providing these accessible facilities, these weren't always executed in a way that made life easy while visiting. Warwick Castle is located in Warwick in the county of Warwickshire in the West Midlands. It is centrally located and close to many major roadways, including the M40, which is just a few minutes' drive from the castle. Other ways to get to the castle include taking the train to Warwick Parkway train station, which is just over 2 miles away. Warwick station is closer, but only the northbound platform is accessible, whereas Warwick Parkway is fully accessible to all platforms. A taxi from the station to the castle is around an 8-minute drive. You can travel directly to Warwick Parkway from London Marylebone, Birmingham Snow Hill and Stratford upon Avon, as well as many other stations, as the station is on both the Chiltern Main Line and the Stratford to Leamington Line. These are all accessible stations where you just need to book assistance to ensure staff are there to help you on and off the train. As you pull off the main road into the castle, you are sent down a long driveway. At the end, the road forks and you have to show staff there your blue badge for them to let you turn left and park in the closer car park. We arrived just before the castle opened at 10 AM, however the few spaces right by the entrance were full. You can be dropped off here and others go and park for you, but we were only told this when we were at the entrance. It also doesn't help those who are the driver or people who can't be left alone, so we were instructed to park in the Stafford Road car park. The other car park is called the Field car park and doesn't have any disabled bays and is a 20-minute walk from the entrance. We parked in Bay B and got ready to head up to the castle entrance. It was then that I saw the short but very steep ramp that took you out of the car park and onto the path up to the entrance. Even with help, this ramp was so steep that I would have toppled backwards, and we witnessed someone in a power chair nearly do this. Luckily the people with them caught them and helped steady the chair, so I went round on the road to Bay A and through the car park to get to the path. Next came the long roll up to the entrance. The app and website says that it's up an incline, but this vastly understates how steep this incline is. I'm very used to going up steep hills when self-propelling and don't have handles on my chair as I am never pushed, but definitely needed help with this one. Not only because it is steep, but the path is winding and the bends make it even steeper at points. Plus you're sharing a fairly narrow path with other pedestrians. This meant that at times I had children running around me, so not only was I focusing on getting up a steep winding path, I also had to make sure I didn't hit them, especially as at times I had to suddenly brake because people walked in front of me or suddenly stopped, or children would run across my path, and as they would be in the trees at times, they would suddenly appear. The fact that the castle has a bus shuttle for the Field car park, but not one for this car park, doesn't seem fair, especially when the shuttle bus runs through this car park and the buses had wheelchair spaces in them. This video is sped up 10 times faster. That's how long this path seemed to go on for. Seeing these disabled bays but being told they were full before the castle even opened was really annoying, especially seeing the coaches next to them. They could easily move the coach bays to the bay I was parked in and make the coach bays extra disabled bays. This would be easy to do as they drive past the car park and could still turn around at the end. Thankfully the path does widen and flatten off towards the top, making it easier to roll up, and the extra space meant I wasn't having to fight for space and suddenly stop when people walked in front of me. Eventually we made it to the top. Entering the castle. We booked tickets online a few days before we went. Disabled people are entitled to a free carer ticket, which has to be booked before you arrive. However, you show your proof of disability when you arrive at the castle. There are a few different ticket options, as the castle has accommodation you can book to stay at, and also the option of buying a yearly pass. However, we just booked the day ticket option. Children under 16 pay less, and children under 2 are free. As you can see, it is easy to select the free carer ticket when booking. The castle has an app that is free to download. This has an interactive map, information about the various shows and exhibits on that day, and also has information about how accessible each of these areas are, as well as showing where the nearest accessible toilets are. There is also space to save your tickets, making it easy to find them when you arrive, as staff just scan the barcode. When you reach the castle entrance, there is a queue for a quick bag search, and then you queue up to show your tickets and enter the castle grounds. When we showed our tickets, I was given an accessibility guide. This had a map of the castle and grounds, as well as information about each area of the castle and how accessible it was, as well as locations of disabled toilets. From the entrance, we wanted to visit the castle first, so we followed everyone else and the signposts along the path up into the castle. This was a big mistake. The path was steep, first downhill, then uphill, and at the end was uphill over rough cobblestones. What we didn't see was the alternative path to a different way into the castle area until we had read the leaflet inside the castle. No one is going to pause and read the leaflet on the path once through the ticket office. I spoke to other wheelchair users that day and they did the same thing, followed the signs and didn't read the leaflet until inside the castle. The first exhibit we visited was the castle dungeons. This isn't fully accessible, with only the last 4 rooms being wheelchair accessible. However, to make up for this, you and a carer get in for free. To get your free time tickets, you go to the shop next door to the dungeon entrance. There is a wheelchair accessible entrance, and staff led us to this area to wait for a group that was about to enter the first accessible room, where we joined them. Filming isn't allowed in the dungeon, so this promotional video from the castle gives you an idea of what to expect. The dungeons are an interactive experience and audience participation happens in each of the 4 rooms. The dungeons are very well done, dark, scary and spooky. However, being deaf, I had zero idea of what was being said, and it was too dark for my mum to assign to me to interpret. A script you can read beforehand would have been a simple yet effective way for those who are deaf to fully enjoy this experience. Next, we wanted to explore the inside of the castle, as the entrance is right next to the dungeons. It was great to see that there was a large lift installed outside the castle to let wheelchair users enter. This was built really nicely to stay in keeping with the history and look of the castle. To use the lift, you had to phone the number on the sign and a member of staff came out with a key. This was really easy to do and the woman was there in seconds. The lift is fairly large, and as I left, a boy in a large power chair used the lift with ease. The lift takes you into a different private entrance to the public one, at the one end of the inside area of the castle. The woman who let us in instructed us on how we could get through onto the other side of the castle to be able to see all areas of the inside, and how we could find her to use the lift when we were finished. This system and lift has been well thought out and worked really well. It's a shame other historic buildings haven't done the same, building a lift that makes the castle accessible but is still in keeping with the look and history of the building. The inside is all on one level, making it fully accessible. This part of the day was really interesting, as one of the main reasons we were visiting the castle was because one of the families who owned Warwick Castle in the past were the Beauchamp family. William de Beauchamp was the first of the family to own it in 1268, and he was my 23rd great-grandfather, so we're really interested in the history of the castle and seeing where they lived. The lift takes you into the very left-hand side of the house, whereas the public entrance is in the middle. There's a long corridor as you turn right into the house, linking all the rooms on that side. The first room we visited was the library, a stunning room with a lovely ornate ceiling and beautiful collection of books. The floor was flat and a mixture of carpet and solid wood. The carpet was not too bad to roll over in my wheelchair compared to many carpets. 2/3 of the room is sectioned off, however there was plenty of space for people to view, so even if it was busy it wouldn't be cramped. I was able to see the whole room with no barrier obstructing my view, as the barrier is a small thin rope below the height of my knees. Next was the Lord Brooke's room, a lovely bright room with a cream interior. The same wooden flooring mixed with carpet ran through here too. Again, most of the room was sectioned off, but there was more than enough space for viewing along with the same low thin barrier that didn't obstruct my view, and the boards of information were at a height that I could easily read. The corridor that links the rooms at this end of the castle is wide enough that even a large power chair would fit, and it takes you onto the breakfast room next. A large red and gold room, and only the edges of this room are cordoned off, which gives you lots of space to roll around and view it from all angles. The breakfast room leads nicely onto the Great Hall. This room is the largest room in the castle and is steeped in 6 centuries of history. It was originally constructed in the 14th century and has had many different uses since. Originally it would have had a fire in the centre and the roof had a hole in it to let out smoke. However, it was rebuilt in the 17th century, redesigned as a grand entrance hall for visitors to the Earl of Warwick. Sadly, in 1871, it had to be redecorated again after fire destroyed it. It also acts as the main entrance of the public visiting the castle nowadays who don't need to use the lift. The room was used for large dinner parties back then, but now it houses some of the impressive collections of armour and related items that belonged to the Earls of Warwick through the years. These are all displayed either in glass cases or on the wall. The cases were fairly high, but I could roll right up to them, so I could always view everything inside them. The items on display on the wall were behind low metal fencing, allowing me to see them easily right up close. The hall is so large that it is easy to roll around and view everything, even though it was the busiest room in the castle, as it is the main entrance for most people. The flooring in the room is tiled, making it smooth and easy to roll over. The Great Hall was really impressive with lots to see and read. Following on from the Great Hall, we went through into the Red Drawing Room. In the past this was known as the Anteroom, which was a small room used as a waiting room that leads onto a larger and more important room, in this case the Great Hall. This lovely red room was a 3-room, and whilst most of it was fenced off, it was easy to see everything. In many of the rooms there were these sheets giving information about the various paintings and portraits on display. Being able to pick these up, as opposed to having the information on the wall, made it easier for me to read from my wheelchair. There were multiple copies of each one too, so you never had to wait for someone else to finish reading. This room led on to another 3-room, the Cedar Drawing Room. This was undergoing renovations when we were visiting, but we were still able to enter and enjoy the cedar panelling that was installed in the 1670s, as well as the beautiful ornate ceiling that they were working on. This room was originally the main ballroom of the castle and was used predominantly for dancing. Being another 3-room, it was again easy to roll through and onto the Gilt Room. The Gilt Room is yet again another 3-room, However, nearly the whole room is accessible, with lots of items on view to look at. The room is easy to get around and I could see everything on display. This room led on to the last room at this end of the castle, the state bedroom, a red room with a very tall bed at one end. The bed was so tall that it was a struggle to see over the top of it. However, you are far enough back that you can see and appreciate the beautiful fabrics. The room led you on through onto a corridor. This corridor then led you back up the castle towards the Great Hall in the middle. The corridor was quite narrow at times, but most power chairs would be fine to fit through. However, if you would struggle to get down it, you can always go back through the rooms to the Great Hall, as the only room off the corridor is the chapel, and sadly this isn't accessible. Whilst the corridor is narrow at times, the large windows keep it light, and there are various ornaments along the way to view. As the castle is laid out in a one-way system at this end, everyone is going in the same direction, so no one is overtaking you or walking towards you. The chapel is accessed via a set of stone stairs, so is only accessible for ambulatory wheelchair users. It is the only room within the castle not wheelchair accessible. The last room accessed down the corridor was the state dining room, which was built in 1763 to serve as a more intimate dining space than the Great Hall. It has since hosted members of the royal family, from Queen Victoria in 1858 to Queen Elizabeth II in 1996. The dining room is off the Great Hall, and so if you can't access it from the corridor, you can access it this way, as you exit the room and the castle through the Great Hall too. Once we had finished looking at the state dining room, we went through to the Great Hall where the staff member was stationed, and she led us through down to the first corridor and back to the lift to exit the castle. Looking around the castle was hungry work, so we decided to head to the conservatory tea rooms next for some lunch. We headed across the castle courtyard, and this was where we found the accessible entrance to the castle area, that we could have used to get into the castle on our way in. We followed the path around to the left of the tea rooms, but if you follow the path to the right, it takes you around to the ticket office. The path left took us along a grassed area where there were various food trucks open as it was summer, and places to sit and eat food bought from the food trucks as well as food you have brought from home. We then turned off the conservatory and toilets and went across the outside seating terraced area and up the ramp inside the tea room. The ramp was a good length and not too steep, and I was able to make my way up myself easily. Inside is quite spacious, and I was able to make my way to the tables easily. It was table service inside too, so you don't have to worry about carrying your food back to your table. The menu wasn't massive, but did cater for specialist diets, and the food was fresh and tasty. We just had a sandwich and a cake. However, you can also order afternoon tea here if you fancy something a little bit more special. Around the side from the tea rooms there were some toilets. There was standard men's and women's, and also a changing places toilet. I was told by staff that this was installed last summer, so I was really excited to check it out. It is well signposted both on physical signage and also on the app and paper maps, but sadly it is located up a steep ramp. I even struggled to get over the top part as the ramp is steep but also not flush with the join to the level part outside the door, so hard to jump your chair over with being on such a steep gradient. I spoke to another wheelchair user that day who couldn't manage to do the ramp on their own due to how steep it was, and also witnessed a power chair user struggling and needing the person with them to steady their chair so it didn't fall backwards. Why they couldn't make the ramp twice as long and so half as steep I don't know, as there's more than enough space to allow for this. Once inside the toilet, however, it is brilliantly laid out. There's a height adjustable sink and bed, as well as a hoist that covers the whole room, and a shower and disabled toilet. The room is massive and there is more than enough space for a large power chair and 2 adults. The only downside to the inside of the room is all the bins around the actual toilet. I had to move some so I could get my chair to the side of the toilet to transfer, but there was more than enough space to move them. Once we had all been to the toilet and freshened up, we went to explore the Peacock Gardens. The gardens were designed by Robert Marnock in the mid to late 19th century and obviously named after the peacocks that still live there. The gardens feature topiary bushes, manicured hedges and stunning flowers with a beautiful fountain. You also get to look at the Pageant Fields that we'll explore in a minute. The gardens have accessible paths that run through them, however some of these paths have steps, so it's like a maze at times trying to find a step-free route through. I was told the peacocks are very noisy with a high-pitched squawk, so those who are sensitive to noise should approach with caution. The paths around the gardens are wide and covered in a type of small gravel that is glued down, so very easy to roll along. Whilst I wasn't able to roll along all the paths because of the steps, I was still able to explore the whole garden and enjoy the views. The Peacock Garden leads on to an area known as the Pageant Field. This grassed area stretches out along the riverside, providing amazing views of the castle as they are very steep. So steep in fact that going down, my Apple Watch told me I was going over 80 miles an hour. The field is named after the famous Warwick pageant held in 1906 by the Earl of Warwick to commemorate 1,000 years since the conquest of Mercia. Members of the community gathered in costume at a magnificent event to celebrate the milestone year. The field was landscaped by the famous Lancelot Capability Brown and is tailor-made to enjoy a stroll through the picturesque grounds. However, as a wheelchair user, you don't enjoy a stroll. It's more an exhilarating fast roll down and an exhausting, almost impossible struggle back up. Some of the paths are so steep that I friction burned holes in my wheelchair gloves going down and had to have help being pushed back up. Even power chair users and those with the power attachment struggled, they are that steep. There are also toilets stationed here in peak season with a small wheelchair accessible portaloo, as well as food kiosks and picnic benches, plus shops selling souvenirs. You can also pay to try archery, and this was wheelchair accessible, however we didn't queue up to have a go. Some of the paths are quite narrow, but as there were lots of them intertwining with each other, it was never an issue. Plus able-bodied people were able to walk across the grass in a more direct fashion, leaving the paths open for me to roll along. Some of the picnic benches aren't right next to the paths, so if you wanted to find somewhere outdoors to eat your lunch, you would have to go on the grass. However, when we went in the summer, the grass was so dry and hard that this wasn't an issue. The fact that there are lots of food kiosks dotted around, especially in peak season, meant that whilst the castle was very busy, queues for food and drink were never very long at all, which was definitely a positive point. Once I had finally made my way down to the bottom of the pageant field to the river, I noticed my next issue. There are 3 live shows happening down at the river here, and the area is known as the Riverside Arena. 2 of those shows had seating areas located on this steep grassy hill. I was so sure that they would have had a paved flat path running along the bottom of this super steep grassy hill. I was shocked when I realised this wasn't the case. The first of these shows was the Trebuchet, and Warwick Castle has one that is nearly 60 foot tall and weighs 22 tons. The Trebuchet is the other side of the river from the seating area, although the seating is just a few rows of wooden benches. Realising there was no wheelchair access provision, I tentatively made my way across the steep grass hill to the seating area. The hill was so steep and the grass so dry that it meant my wheels skidded and caused me to slip down towards the river when rolling perpendicular to it, even with my brakes on, so I needed someone to help me get across to act as a counterweight. The app and signs around the arena displayed the times for the various shows, and we made sure we were seated just before the start of the next one. There were speakers concealed in front of the seating area, but unfortunately for us, that day, the speakers just let us know that the trebuchet wasn't working. People were welcome to head over the bridge to see the trebuchet in person, but as we weren't sure if we would be able to stay over the bridge between the end of this talk and the start of the show that was located over the bridge, we didn't risk heading over to have a look, only to have to head back over and then back over again. The next show was the War of the Roses, held in a purpose-built for the season jousting arena next to the trebuchet. The bridge, as I mentioned, was steep at the start and end and had loose gravel between the bridge and the arena entrance. The arena had a designated wheelchair platform, however it really wasn't fit for purpose. The platform was small, had no shelter from the bright sun, and didn't even have enough seating for carers, let alone families wanting to sit together. Also, we were at the end of the arena and not on the two sides, so it was hard to see the show, as often we just saw the actors' backs. It would be better when they build it for the next season to add accessible seating on the end of the two sides. The show was great, but again there was no script, so I had to rely on my rusty knowledge of the War of the Roses to remember what was happening. I did contact the group who do the show, Knights of Middle England, about this, and also some interpreted shows would be great too, and they replied saying that this is something they want to do, so hopefully next year it will be in place, fingers crossed. The final show we saw was the Falconers Quest, which is the UK's largest bird of prey display with 60 birds of prey. Like the trebuchet show, you sit on the steep grassy hill on wooden benches where there is no wheelchair accessible provision, and when the show starts, a pontoon comes across the river with the man who does the show. He has a microphone and there are concealed speakers dotted around the area. Again, I was unable to hear what was being said, but I was still able to enjoy the show, and it was amazing watching all the birds flying around. Some even have a wingspan of 9 feet. The birds all fly around, a few at a time whilst he talks about them, and they fly over the audience, often at a low height, so you really get to see them up close. Sometimes very close, as I found out the scary way that the birds are taught to fly down between the benches in front of the people sitting on them. However, I had sat my wheelchair in between the benches at the end of the row, and this happened. At the end of the show, they are all allowed to fly around the area, so the sky is filled with dozens of birds of prey, and it is such a magical sight seeing all these majestic birds flying over your head. It really was the highlight of the day. Due to time constraints and some attractions not being accessible, there are a few places we didn't get to explore. The first was the Horrible Histories Maze. This is right by the entrance, just past the ticket office, and we planned to visit this on the way out, however it was shut when we left. We did have time in between shows, but the Riverside Arena and Maze are opposite sides of the site and up and down steep paths that I didn't want to roll all the way over and all the way back, especially when I would have to go over the grass to the seating area again, so it was easier to just sit and enjoy the view on the Pageant Field. The maze is accessible for most wheelchair users, and whilst flat, the path is uneven at times. Inside are activities that aren't accessible for some wheelchair users, but there are alternative routes that you can take to avoid these. The next was the Kingmaker, which is an exhibit inside the castle that isn't wheelchair accessible. This is a walkthrough exhibit where it is 1471 and Richard Neville, commonly known as Warwick the Kingmaker, is preparing his army for battle. The Kingmaker is not suitable for wheelchair users as it is down steps and the path throughout is cobblestones. The next part of the castle that isn't accessible for wheelchair users are the towers and ramparts. There are 2 towers in the castle. Guy's Tower is 29 metres high and Caesar's Tower is 40 metres high. Guests can climb these and peer over the top and admire the view from where soldiers would fire their arrows in battle. As this involves climbing up steep stone steps, it is not wheelchair accessible. The last attraction we couldn't visit as it is not wheelchair accessible is the Conquerors Fortress. Guests can climb to the top and enjoy the vantage point and natural defences that drew William the Conqueror to Warwick. Again, as it involves climbing up lots of steep stone steps, it is not wheelchair accessible. I guess wheelchair access wasn't strong on planners' minds in 1068, so I will let them off for not making this and the towers accessible. However, you can enjoy them from the ground. The falconry display finished, and then they announced at the end that the castle had shut at 5 p.m, and so we all needed to leave. We visited at the end of August, and we felt 5 p.m. was very early, and many people around us seemed shocked and remarked how they hadn't had time to see everything on offer. We started to make our way out from the Pageant Field to the exit, and this is really hard going. The paths are really steep getting across to the ticket office, which is also the way out. They were also very narrow at times and very busy, but everyone is going in the same direction, which helped flow. Some parts of the path are really steep on the corners, which adds an extra camber issue, and so are very tricky. It was also really annoying passing locked gates that led out to the road we needed to get to head to the car park and be made to go a longer route. Turns out the longer route was because they want you to pass through the gift shop on your way out. This was really busy and whilst accessible, was really hard to get around at the end of the day. This isn't the only gift shop you can visit. There are other smaller ones dotted around the grounds, but as everyone was made to walk through here at the end of the day, it made it hard to get around, even to just get out towards the car park. There are also toilets here, however the toilet labelled disabled here is probably one of the smallest disabled toilets I have ever seen. I have a small active chair and I struggle to get in and close the door. A power chair, even a small one, would not manage. So if you need the toilet before you go home, stop by the Changing Places toilet on your way across the grounds to the exit. All in all, Warwick Castle was an enjoyable day out but hard work. It is clear they have done a lot to try and make the castle accessible for wheelchair users, but these aren't always well thought out or work well. The lift into the castle was great, it is in keeping with the castle, works as needed and makes the castle accessible with the exception of the chapel. The same with how they have made the last part of the dungeons experience accessible and made it free for wheelchair users. The disabled parking, Changing Places toilet and wheelchair viewing area in the jousting arena are all made with disabled people and wheelchair users in mind, but it feels like they didn't consult a disabled person when adding these, as they don't really work as well as they could, but with some small tweaks like I have mentioned in the video, they would be much better. Then there are places like the Pageant Field that has not been designed with wheelchair users in mind, which is a shame when it is home to 2 of the shows and could easily be made accessible with a flat paved path along the bottom. The steep paths are sort of unavoidable, however there is more than enough space to have the paths meander up and down the steep parts, making the paths longer but less steep and so easy to go up and down. I did email Warwick Castle a few days after I visited with this feedback and explaining how I would be more than happy to help them make these changes to ensure the castle is as fully accessible as it can be for their disabled customers. However, as it stands at the start of editing this video in November, I have not yet had a reply, which is unfortunate. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe to help me make more review videos to help everyone see how accessible places are, and don't forget to have a really great week.